right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another weekly webinar here at Route Consultant. For those of you who are here for the first time, never been to one of these, my name is Josh Gregory. I'm the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. All that really means is that I'm going to work with buyers as they're getting into the space for the first time to really get educated, but also we work with current contractors all the time to help them understand how their businesses are functioning, the good and the bad, and help them perform better, increase those margins. But all that to say, we work with everyone across the board, and we want these webinars to be a place for both buyers and current contractors to always find a place to come as they're getting into this space, or if they've been here for decades, to learn, ask questions, and make sure you're updated on anything that's changing in the industry. So we always want to make sure that this is a place that will always live here week to week for all of that. Now, if you've never been here, the way this format's going to work, in just a second, we're going to go over some content and some updates. And then at the end of this session, we will have an open Q&A. So whether you have a question about anything that we talk about today or anything that you have as a question at all about this space, we'll be sure to answer it. My only ask is that you try to put that in the Q&A at the bottom. If you put it in the chat, I'll miss it. So just make sure you put those questions into the Q&A button at the bottom of the window. Now, before I go too much further, there is a quick disclaimer that I have to read as I do every week. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. All that to say, we should still have plenty of important information for you here today. So we will get to that in just a second. Now, for today, one of the questions that we get all the time in this space is deciding how to compare different types of run structures for Linehaul. What's the right way to think about it? So we wanted to talk through that today and how to think through really what a balanced portfolio looks like. And so to help with that, we've brought Alex Froome back on to bring his experience. And for those of you who haven't seen him, his previous webinars or haven't seen him before in the past, he is a large linehaul contractor with runs across the country who is very aware and very intimately involved in all of these types of discussions. So Alex, if you want to go ahead and come on and say hello to everybody.
Hello, Josh. Hi, everyone.
Hey, it is always good to have you. So I'll go ahead and let you kind of kick it off from here, and we'll just keep this discussion going.
Sure. So I think when I think about a balanced portfolio, there's no one perfect portfolio out there. I mean, I know a lot of contractors out there who are really into spots, a lot of contractors who are really into solos, a lot of contractors who are really into teams. For me, what a balanced portfolio means is it means that you have a lot of consistent runs that are going to run on a regular basis and generate revenue, but also you have the opportunity to grow within your hub area or within your station. And the idea is to grow is you need to have something called URRs or unassigned runs. So, to take a step back and go into the big picture, we have dedicated runs, which are on the contract or on the TSPA, the Transportation Service Provider Agreement, called ARs or assigned runs. There's two different types. There's solos and teams. And then you have something called the unassigned run rotation, where there are URs or unassigned runs. And so in the FedEx world, your dedicated runs go out on a consistent basis. They might go out Tuesday through Saturday or Monday through Friday, but they're doing the same run, day in, day out, week in, week out. And then your unassigned runs, those are your growth opportunities. And that's how you move and grow within the network. And we'll actually talk a little bit about that some more, but so that's to me how you want to have a balanced portfolio. So within every station and within every terminal that I operate in, I try to have at least one unassigned run, either in a solo spot or in a team spot. And actually in some of my locations, I happen to have both an unassigned team and an unassigned solo in that realm. Now, what this means is that it allows me, when FedEx decides to post new runs for bid to grow, to turn into new dedicated runs, I can use those points that I've earned on my unassigned run rotation, and I can use those unassigned runs to convert them into dedicated runs. And that's how you build equity within this business. So to me, having a balanced portfolio means to have both dedicated runs and unassigned runs. And I would say, by and large, you want to have probably, you want to have less than 25% of your runs as unassigned runs, because there is an inconsistency to the unassigned run rotation. There are weeks where you're going to be absolutely crushing it and doing, 3,500 miles as a solo unassigned run, or maybe over 6,000 miles as a team run, a team unassigned run. But then there are going to be some slower weeks where you're doing maybe 1,800 miles on an unassigned solo, or maybe 4,200 miles on an unassigned team. So that's something that you want to think about, where as you try to build your pro forma out and you build out your cash flows and you think about where and how you want to grow the business over time, you want to have that consistency that the assigned runs give you, and then you want to have the optionality or the variability that the URR or the unassigned runs give you, so that you can actually grow within the space organically and not have to constantly grow through acquisition.
Yeah, and before we move on from this topic, I think that makes perfect sense in terms of comparing these types of runs. I think, that's always kind of been the message that we've preached as well. It's important to have a core of dedicated, but it's worth it from a growth perspective to have unassigned. How do you start to think about, from a kind of building your run portfolio, the value of, multiple locations versus one? Like, when does it make sense to focus your growth outside of one location versus just continuing to try to add volume where you are?
Well, I mean, you have a couple different metrics, right? So if you are, depending on where you are, if you're at a hub area, or if you're at a station, or if you're in a regional sort facility, so there's many different types of facilities that FedEx operates in. But at the grand scheme of things, if you're in a hub area, there's a limit on how big you're going to be allowed to grow. What that limited is kind of opaque. I know of contractors who are massive, and there are, some contractors who are pretty small. And I've been told, by both of them that, I'm at my limit and I can't grow. And you look at one that maybe has, 15 tractors in a terminal versus one that has 30, and you're like, how does this make sense? A lot of times it's more a function of safety and how good your safety score is about how large you're going to grow. So for me, I'm in 3 terminals right now. I'm in, one terminal, I only have 3 tractors in. So that's me starting my foothold. I'm trying to expand and grow in that one. The other terminal, the first terminal I ever got into, I have 9 tractors in right now. And then the second terminal I got into, that actually happens to be my largest operation, and I have 21 tractors in that one. So but that was also the opportunity where I got the most opportunities to grow and expand organically, was in that second terminal. And so for me, I think where you want to be at, and it all depends on what the amount of volume is and how much work you can get from that manager in that place managing that operation. Because for you to be able to expand into 3 or 4 or 5, you have to have a really good base and a very strong management team to be able to allow you the flexibility to take your eye off that ball and put it somewhere else. So to me, I think where it really makes sense and where you can start to justify it is at that probably at a minimum around probably 6 or 7 tractors. At that point, you have a manager that's paying for himself. He's managing the operation. You're generating enough additional free cash flow that you can start setting it aside, and then you can start looking at an opportunity to expand into another market. And you can do it one of 2 ways at that point. You can try to grow organically through build a ground biz and submit an RFI for unassigned runs, which is very competitive. Or what I find it has been my metric is that when I decide that I want to grow, I look at my footprint in my area, and then I say, okay, I'm going to try to get 2 tractors in this area, and then from there I've established a foothold. It's kind of like a beachhead in the military. I've gotten to first base, and then from there I'm going to try to steal more runs or acquire more things in the baseball parlance and expand from that area. So for me, I was in Memphis and I looked across the street and Olive Branch is 19 miles away. And I'm like, they're two different districts. I could grow to be 15 tractors in each, and I wouldn't be on peak. I wouldn't be in scale in either one. So I said, okay. So I sat there and I kept bugging the senior line haul manager in Olive Branch over and over again, said, hey, can you give me 2 runs? Can you give me 2 runs? And he said, no. So I eventually went out and bought 2 runs, and now I'm at 3. So I'm hoping to convert that one I have two dedicated runs in Olive Branch, and I'm hoping to convert the one unassigned that I have in there into another dedicated run. And then when that occurs, I will actually seek a new unassigned run. So I always try to keep at least one or two unassigned runs in every terminal that I operate in. So I always have that opportunity to grow organically.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a great heuristic and thought process there. You know, if there, let's say there was a world where in Olive Branch where you are right now, there were two dedicated runs that were, let's say, exactly the mileage you're looking for, and then two opened up at a terminal that you were interested in, two dedicated runs, which and let's say it's the exact same mileage. Which one is more attractive for you? You get the kind of the efficiencies of scale of a market that you're already in versus that beachhead model. So, where would you jump next on a portfolio basis there?
I mean, it all depends. I mean, I think it all goes back to what you want to do with your business and how you want to grow it, and where you want to place your emphasis. Like I have a friend of mine right now who's desperate to get into Ocala, Florida.
Yeah.
I wonder why. He's 55 years old. He's been doing Linehaul for about 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
He's been up in Minneapolis for the last 15 years. He seems for some reason, you think, oh, maybe he's going to expand into Chicago or into Cedar Rapids, but no, he really wants to go to Ocala. I wonder what's going on there. So it's a lot of that's the attractiveness about being in line haul, is that you can get a run or do business wherever you want to do within the 48 contiguous states. There is, trust me, I believe there is a station in every single state, within the lower 48. And there are hubs there are 24 or 26 different hubs. So there are a lot of different opportunities. So that becomes back to you. Like I took an opportunity. I reside in Denver. You can't see the mountains right now, but there's too much sunlight. But I reside in Denver and I have operations in Olive Branch, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, and Northern Kentucky. And so those opportunities for me are great. I really love, and I have a strong relationship with those senior line haul managers. I've built relationships with the planners and the senior coordinators, but I still reside in Denver and I go visit those operations, 4 to 6 times a year. I'm actually leaving next week to go see my operations in Northern Kentucky. So, that's how I operate my business. Now, there's others who want to be more involved. I have a really good friend who runs, I think he has a truck in every station in Kansas. And so that's what he likes to do. He likes to drive, back and forth across Kansas, checking out, he goes from Hayes, Kansas, which is almost on the Colorado border, all the way back to KCMO and Lenexa. So, that's what he likes to do. He likes to be on the road visiting his different operations. He goes to all those different, little podunk towns, or not podunk, I shouldn't say that, but he goes to like Leavenworth and Riley and Manhattan, Kansas, and that's just his thing. That's what he wants to do. There are other guys who are want to be in Texas, and they're in Dallas and Fort Worth and Irving and Houston and San Antonio. I mean, that's the flexibility that you have with being a line haul contractor. You can do what you want and what makes sense for your business and for your appetites and for your interests.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I think we can at the lowest level always say, hey, yeah, have dedicated runs. Unassigns are worth it from a growth perspective, but I really think it also helps to think through some of these additional things, how you plan on building and growing. And, there may be two opportunities that are equal on paper in terms of the revenue potential, but there's a lot of other things to think about there in terms of what's best for your business and how you want to build and how you want to manage. Because you're right. Yeah, it may be that you just want to travel around kind of a concentrated area or operate fully remotely, have places across the country, or just maybe it's a one destination that you're trying to get to. Like if you're trying to get out to Ocala and retire in the villages. So there's plenty of opportunities there in this
Yeah.
space. And as opposed to P&D, you don't have to be there every day. There's people who can, but you've got a lot more options there.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to think about then is within that matrix, like how many teams do you want to have? And there's no perfect definition or metric on how many teams. Just think of it this way. It's a function of risk versus reward. The safest business that you're going to be in is your solos, right? Your driver's going out, he's driving 200 to 300 miles a day, or sorry, on each leg. He's going out to a location, he's bumping, or maybe he's doing a terminal, dropping some tailors and then coming back. And so his round trip, the amount that he's on the road might be 10 to actually probably as short as 8 hours to as long as 11 hours, but he's going to sleep every night at home with, and he's seeing his loved ones. But that's the least amount of pay that you're going to get paid on a per mile basis doing this business. The other option is you can go into teams. Okay. Teams are much greater reward, right? The more you keep the wheels rolling on the truck, the more revenue that you generate, but it's riskier. Your trucks are on the road, for days on end. My teams, when they go out, they're on the road for 5 consecutive days, sometimes 6 consecutive days, and then they come home. They don't see their loved ones for a week. Your trucks have are driving a lot more miles. My team trucks average around 250,000 miles a year. So that means I have higher maintenance bills on those trucks, but on a per mile basis, I'm generating a lot more revenue. So there's more risk, but also more reward on the teams. And then the last area is spots. Okay, spots are great. They're very low mileage. I mean, you might be doing at most 150 miles in one day. I mean, I know a guy who does 190 miles a day, makes the same amount of money on his runs, his number of spots that he does, as I do on my, on my 500-mile run. But the risk there for him is that he's doing a lot of spots. So he's doing a lot of backing and going forward and turning, and taking a lot of risk of having a lot more accidents. So it's all a function of risk and reward. There's a lot of different opportunities and a lot of preferences of what you want to do. But you got to find what makes the most sense for you.
Definitely. And I think all of those things are, you can start to conceptualize, but in a specific listing, a specific opportunity, you're kind of going to have to use that heuristic you develop for yourself, but also there's going to be uniqueness about all of these to think through. And any questions anyone has on those, it's always something where we're happy to help Alex or our team here.
Yeah. I mean, and we can work through anything. I mean, there are so many different possibilities here, and it's such a great business to be in. I mean, let's be honest. I've been in this business for 5+ years, and I don't regret a minute of it. I really enjoy what I do. I mean, I wouldn't be on here talking to Josh on a regular basis if I wasn't really enjoying about what I did. I've met some amazing individuals. I've gotten to travel and see different parts of the country. I got, into, working with other contractors on how to develop and become a better contractor because of, my interest in this. And so, this is what I really enjoy doing. And there's so many different flexibilities on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, well, I think that's what I wanted to cover on the run composition side, but I know there were a few updates you wanted to make sure everybody knew about that's happening in the space right now.
Yes. So there's a couple different things I wanted to go over. If you guys haven't been on MGB, so there's 2 different websites that FedEx provides information for. There's one called MGB, which is My Ground Biz. That's where you get a lot of your news. Also, where FedEx kind of has a lot of different forms and a lot of different instructions on how to do different things. The other thing is called MGBA, which is My Biz account, where you get your settlement statements. Also, where you get a lot of your metrics. You can find out about how you do peak points and stuff like that. So, a couple of different things. If you haven't been paying to MGB, pay attention to MGB recently. One is that peak points are out. So we got our peak points awarded to us on February 19th. We have until March 18th. So we have 29 days. I guess February has 29 days this year. We have 29 days to get our peak points in and allocate them. Otherwise, FedEx is just going to evenly distribute them. If you don't know how to do this, give Josh or me a call and we can walk you through it. But it's on MGBA under point distribution. The next thing is that we are, the move towards a one FedEx is happening. As of June 1st, all our trucks and logos will have to say that they're operated by Federal Express Corporation. And we will have a new DOT number. So between March 1st and June 1st, there's going to be an incentive awarded to contractors for transitioning their logos over to this new dynamic and this new vehicle schematic. So make sure you get this done. You don't want to leave, the vehicle incentive program on the sidelines. And then the final thing, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart, is Linehaul contractors are going to have the opportunity to rate their facilities over the next couple weeks. So this is really important. I know everybody thinks that Big Brother is always looking and overshooting, and looking down, and nothing's ever anonymous. Trust me, this is the opportunity for you to affect change within your hub area, within your station, within your terminal. Be honest, be constructive. If your drivers are complaining about the restroom facilities in your hub area, then make sure you do so. FedEx is investing money to try to create a better driver experience in their facilities. If you see a lot of switchers not wearing their safety vests, then comment on that in the safety portion. If the showers are moldy and your teams don't want to take showers in Rialto or in Metuchen or in Woodbridge, then comment on that, okay? This is how we get changes, and this is how we make our experience and our drivers' experience better. So 100%, every contractor who listens to this, or every contractor we know, should be out there making sure that they rate their facilities, from everything from communication to dispatch times to bunt times to the facilities to safety. This is really, really important. And this is how we have a better network, and how we make improvements to the driver experience, so they don't leave us and go to, somewhere else where they think that the facilities are better. Because, the last thing that FedEx wants and the last thing that we want is for driver turnover. It hurts the network. Okay. So this is perfect for us. This is our opportunity to make changes. So please get involved and comment. Okay.
Yeah. And that's huge. There's lots of times that we want to give kind of unprompted feedback to FedEx, but when they actually open the door and are asking for it, it's something that it's critical for everyone to kind of speak up and give their feedback and help out the terminal and the network. It's, at the end of the day, we want FedEx and we want the terminals to be better and to be more successful, to keep drivers and to just overall keep the network as healthy as we can. So all of these are good things, but it is a good time to actually give that feedback when you've got the chance.
Yeah, and FedEx takes this seriously. I mean, I remember we had the rate your facility experience last year, and we had an issue with how an issue with one of our hubs about the docks, and how do we know when the dock doors or when the trailer doors are closed on the docks. And so FedEx looked at this and addressed the issue, and they actually sat down with contractors and said, okay, how can we come up with a solution? So one of the things they've done is, obviously, they put the lights into all the docks. So you have a red light if the dock doors are open, or a green light if the dock doors are closed, the trailer doors are closed. But the other thing they also did was they actually put in a hole into the walls of all the docks, so that drivers can actually reach their hand in and feel to make sure that the doors to the trailers are closed, so we don't have pull-off events. And so that's a real positive thing to think about. That's contractors getting to FedEx and saying, hey, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And FedEx saying, okay, we're going to get with contractors and figure out how we can provide a more safer environment to both the dock workers and to our truck drivers.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, and the other two things are also really important. If you're a contractor on here, you've got a limited time frame to take advantage of both peak point distribution and the logo incentive program. So just make sure you don't miss that window. A lot of times I see people who don't notice it until it's too late, especially on incentives, and try to get it, and you're going to miss the window. So it's a limited time frame. If you have questions on how to get through either of those programs, just like Alex said, reach out to us and we can help. So that is it. That was it for your updates, right, Alex?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So in just a second, we're going to open it to Q&A, and we're going to go through any and all questions you all have. Before that, I'm just going to quickly read through the new listings that we came out with this week. So if you have any questions, it's the time to type them while I'm reading these listings. So the first new listing we have is out of Florida. This is 11 P&D routes at $800,000. It has a manager, 3 spare trucks. And it's really low mileage territory. And so if you're looking for something out of Florida, these come and go quickly. And so if that's the territory you're trying to get in, that is the new one this week in Florida. Next one is out of Georgia. This is 6 P&D routes at $929,000. Really high margin business. It's got a manager and a spare truck, and it's only operating 6 days a week. So no Sundays for this one. And so if, again, North Central Georgia, that's kind of the area for that one. Last P&D, or the last FedEx one we have, is a Linehaul run. It's out of the New England area. It's $630,000. This one is 2 dedicated solos and 1 unassigned. So like we talked about, mainly dedicated, but you've got that additional unassigned for growth. And this is this is a fairly low entry point for Linehaul, actually, at $630,000. So if you have questions on any of those on the FedEx side, reach out to our team. We can give you all the details on all those listings. The last listing for this week, though, is actually Amazon. This one is 25 Amazon routes at $700,000, and it's out of the Massachusetts area. And so this one is one with multiple managers in place, really clean financials. And so if you're looking for Amazon and looking particularly in that area, because one of the big things on the Amazon side, if you're not familiar, is you do want to be a little bit closer to the operation. So if you're looking in the Massachusetts area, that is a new Amazon opportunity for you. And again, like I said, if you have questions on any of these, you can reach out to our team. We can send you the details on each of those listings, the financials, and answer all those questions that you have. Also, as a reminder on the event side, we do have a series of events that we do every year. So we have something called the New Investor Summit first. That is, it's designed as a way for you to figure out if FedEx is for sure the right opportunity for you. It used to be an in-person only event. Now it is a digital on demand. So if you've decided that FedEx is the right space for you, or if you're still on that fence, that's really designed as a crash course to teach you all that we can about the FedEx opportunity and to help you decide if P&D or Linehaul is the opportunity for you. And so you can sign up right now, have access to the digital event immediately. And with it also comes workshops. So we do usually a couple of quarter in-person workshops where if you've attended one of our New Investor Summits, you then have free access to our workshops, which are really designed as a way for you to come in person, meet us, meet our team, meet vendors, and ask questions that you didn't get a chance to in that digital environment, and really find a way to network and take those next steps as quickly as you can. So it's all a part of the same package there. And our next workshop is on March 28th in Nashville. So if you're looking for that next one. We also have happy hours across the country. So if our full happy hour schedule's in the chat. So if you're looking for when we're going to make it out to your neck of the woods, we've got that full calendar for the year posted. And so you can kind of see when we're headed into your area. And those are completely free. We'll provide all the food and drinks, and it's a good opportunity to network with others in your area. And then always, the last event I always got to remind everybody on is our big Contractor Expo and party that we host every year. This is the first week of August this year, and it's in Dallas, Texas. And this is a time, it's multiple days, tons of content, tons of learning, ways for you to make sure you are operating effectively, and ways to find out about all of the things that are happening in the industry and all the things that we expect to happen in the industry, but also just a chance for you to meet contractors from across the country. And it is free to attend, food, drink, everything's there for you. The only thing you have to book is your hotel room. So just go ahead. Though that hotel block is continuing to sell out. So if you want to make sure you get that at the discounted rates, I'd go ahead and register for that now. Okay, so those are the events and listings. Details on all that in the chat if you're looking for a way to click on it quickly. But we do have some questions here in the Q&A. So first one here is from Ryan. So Alex, can you talk a little bit about what your day-to-day reality looks like now, since you're remote and you have managers in multiple regions? What do you try to handle and continue to keep as a part of your responsibilities versus what you've offloaded?
Sure. And I'm going to actually answer this as what I was like about 4 years ago when I first got into the business and I wasn't as large. Because what I do now when I have 3 full-time managers, an HR manager, and a finance specialist is a lot different than what I was doing when I first got into the business. And I think that's more important to understand. So when I first got into business, I started off with 4 dedicated runs in Memphis. I had 1 manager, and I quickly, as Josh really enjoys this story, picked up 3 unassigned runs, not really knowing what I was doing. So, within, I want to say, about 3 weeks of me becoming a contractor, all of a sudden I found myself with 7 runs. So it just, was a little bit of a Wild West back then. And I think a terminal manager who just took advantage of my lack of knowledge. So I had a manager who dealt with anything. So I would get up around Usually around 6 o'clock in the morning, I would talk to my manager, make sure that, we were at the time, the unassigned run rotation was getting out really early. And so we were making sure that either he or I was talking to the dispatchers to make sure that our unassigned run rotation was getting out. So we had 3 tractors at the time. So we wanted to make sure that, one, our drivers had showed up to work, they had checked in. They each had to show, what we did was they had to get into their truck, they had to turn on their truck, log into Omnitrax to show that they were actually there. And then this was before MTA, and we would call dispatch, find out what runs were available, find out what spot we were on the rotation. We'd get our run offerings. We'd, work through which ones we wanted to do, and then we communicate them to the drivers, and then make sure that the drivers had no mechanical issues and got out the door. So it was a lot of phone calls early in the morning, between about 6 and 9 in the morning. Once all the drivers got out, then I'm working on either updating maintenance logs, doing, paying bills, or if it's on a Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, I'm going through payroll. Wednesday is payroll. So is when I do all my payroll. FedEx releases settlement statements around, I think it's like 9:15 every night Eastern time. So depending on where you are, you have access to your settlement statements. This was before Holiday Tech and My Ground Force and Forward Air Solutions. So I would sit there and print out the PDF of the settlement statements. And luckily mine was only, 4 or 5 pages long. And I would sit there and, translate it all literally into Excel, and then calculate my, my settlement and my payroll. And then I would input my payroll into my driver. And so Wednesday was usually a longer day for me. I usually try to get payroll done by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And get that off. And then Thursday and Friday, it was, like I said, usually a good solid 3 to 4 hours in the morning of on phone calls, making sure my managers are getting my drivers out the door, talking to vendors, looking at maintenance issues, maybe talking to mechanic shops. But realistically, I'm not doing much past around lunchtime. Once your trucks are out on the road and off, I mean, you just have to have your phone and be available to talk to them, just in the event that, there's an issue on the road. If you're obviously a night PM guy, if you're on the PM rotation, then your day is reversed. You're finding about runs, usually around 7 o'clock at night, and you're getting all your runs out around 10 to 11 PM. And so then you need to be up, throughout the night, or have a manager who's up throughout the night working through those issues. But a lot of times, like I said, your phone is your best friend. You need to have that phone on you. When I first got into business, and I was kind of sharing some of the managerial responsibilities of my BC. I mean, I literally lived with like a little Bluetooth device attached to my ear. Now that I have my managers in place, and I've really pushed the operational issues down to them. I'm doing more big picture things. And that's the biggest thing that you want to know, is that as soon as you can, you want to get to the point where you have the business. I think Spencer used to talk about this, and other people have talked about this on entrepreneurship shows, is that you don't want to be working in the business as an owner. You want the business working for you. So you want to step back and empower your managers to run the operations, and really evaluate them on how well they operate your business in your area. And if they're not doing a good job, then you need to replace them. And then instead, what you need to do is you need to focus on, how do I grow my business? How do I become more efficient? Where can I save money? And that's from, looking at vendors, that's from doing finances, working with the banks, all those different areas. That's what you should be spending your time on. And that's what I try to focus on.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's what we say all the time of, work on the business, not in the business, of trying to find ways to pull back and leave the operations in the hands of someone like your BC. But, in Linehaul, it's a little bit easier to get to that point faster than P&D, I would say.
So Ryan, I mean, right now I would say I get up. I mean, I live in the mountains, and all my operations are either on the East Coast or in the Central Time Zone. So I usually get up around 5:30 to 6 o'clock. I'm talking to my managers between 6 and 7, identifying any maintenance issues, working through those, and they have a lot of power on their own to do things. So like, my managers know that they can authorize any mechanical work under $2,500. Anything in excess of $2,500, they have to seek my approval for. But so they know that they can just go, schedule a mechanic and get them to come out and do the work if they have a maintenance issue, as long as the estimate's under $2,500. They understand the goal of what we're trying to achieve on the unassigned run rotation. So they're handling that. So for me, it's more of like, hey, how's it going today? What issues did you have? What do I need to get involved in where I need to use my AO hat, my business owner hat, and talk to either the senior line haul manager or a coordinator or a planner and say, hey, quit screwing around with my business. What's going on? But in general, they're dealing with that. I mean, like last night, I got a call from, perfect example. At 10 o'clock last night, my BC calls me up and says, hey, one of our team drivers needs to get a drug test. I'm like, okay, what's the big issue? Well, he's on the road and we got a drug screen. I'm like, okay, just call back to FedEx and say, hey, when can we schedule him for a drug screen since he's on the road right now? And so he worked through, that was me saying, okay, we're going to work through this issue. Manager, come on, manage, do your job. And it's not that big of it's not that scary of an incident. And he solved the issue. He talked to FedEx. They came up with a solution. And, my driver, who's not going to be back for another 3 days, is going to take a drug test while he's on the road. So it's not that big of an issue, but your job as an owner, a lot of times with these managers is like, you can be the guy who solves all the problems, and then your phone is going to always be ringing. Or you can be the guy who's going to teach and construct and criticize your managers to the point where they can make all these decisions on your own. And they're only calling you to either vent when they've had a bad day, which happens, or they're going to call you and say, hey, can you talk to, so-and-so, our number one Kalamazoo, Michigan is getting screwed around with. I need you to put your big boy hat on and talk to the boss at FedEx to straighten this out, because I've tried and I'm getting nowhere. So that's my thought process on the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful for people to kind of see how that evolved over time and see the right ways to start to build your management team to help be the solution, not just they expect you to solve everything. That doesn't really save anybody time.
No, I mean, like my morning this morning, I reviewed payroll with my payroll person, and we submitted payroll. So that took me about a half an hour. And then I spent, a good 3 hours working on tractor files because I'm buying 2 new trucks. And it's not a lot of work. It's just a lot of minutia, making sure and double checking, making sure you did your 2290s and you did your LHO 35 and 45 and 33 and submitting all these forms to FedEx how they want them. And it's just a lot of little things, and it's something that I happen to enjoy doing. I don't pass that off onto my managers, and so that's something I do. I know other contractors who have their managers do that. It's a question of what you want to focus on.
Yeah, 100%. And some of it's, what are your managers capable of versus what are the things that I enjoy doing? Yeah. So that's always the decision you make. But there's just fewer day-to-day things to deal with on the line haul versus P&D if you're kind of comparing those two.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of the day, your truck drivers are not really going to want to see you. They come into work, they get it, they hop in their cab, they call into MTA or they log into MTA, find out where their load is, go hook up to those trailers, do a pre-trip inspection, get out on the road. They drive their 4.5 hours, take their 30-minute rest break, swap their trailers, come back, drop their trailers off, break down their set, do a post-trip inspection, park their vehicle, and go home and have a couple buds. That's what their goal is every night.
Yeah,
that's what they're doing.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So thanks for kind of talking through that for Ryan. And Ryan, I see your follow-up question there of, are there any other can you watch previous webinars? Yeah. So any webinar we've done, so that is years of material there, is on our YouTube page for free. So if you go to just search Route Consultant on YouTube, and we have a page, and every webinar we've ever done and will do each and every week gets posted immediately to YouTube. So if you're looking for just hours and hours of content, we've got it for you to sit and watch and read through or listen through.
I think they've been doing, I've only been doing this with Josh for like 3, 4 or 2 months now, I think. But if you want, I think there's you can find webcasts going all the way back to like 2015, 2016.
Yeah, something like that is when we first started. And then I think the most that when we started doing them really consistently week to week was like late 2019 as the pandemic hit and we couldn't do events. So very consistent there at minimum. So like I said, years of content where we've done this every single week.
Yeah.
Question here from John. So, this might be something where we might have to ask for some clarification. He said slam locks are required for roll-up vans. Is there a similar requirement for barn doors on vans to be locked? And how do you go about meeting that requirement? That might be a P&D thing.
Yeah, that's a P&D thing. So as a line haul contractor, all we need to provide to FedEx is a tractor. They provide the trailers, and I want to say 95% of the trailers that FedEx provides are roll-ups, and they actually use um, these little metal tabs, which are really annoying because if the switchers cut them off, they're like little tabs that lock in place. They're kind of like a zip tie almost. But if the switcher cuts them off and they drop to the ground and don't fleece them back up and clean them up, they're commonly puncture tractor tires, and then you have to go replace your tire.
Yeah.
So there's actually a big measure by FedEx right now to constantly sweep the yard because of trailer tires and tractor tires getting punctured by these little bolt seals, what they call them.
Yeah.
So that's what FedEx utilizes. On the P&D side, Josh, I'm not a P&D guy, so I'll defer to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, people use different things like master locks or different things, but you do have anti-theft devices on the vehicles as well that are a requirement for all P&D vehicles. It should be on any vehicle you're looking at. It's been a requirement for a couple of years now. And those are on any new purchase of a vehicle you'll make in this space, those are required as well. Okay, here, what are the requirements for getting into the business? And is it the same requirement if you have a partner? Like, does everybody have to match those requirements? And I can chime in on this too, but I'll let you answer first.
Yeah. So the first things is that you need to be you need to have an S corp and need to be qualified to create an S corp. You cannot run this well, actually, I take it back. You can do a C corp. They're very rare. I don't know if anybody that actually has a C corp, and the tax treatment is really unfavorable as unless you're really, really big for C corps. So you're going to want to create an S corp. You can't do an LLC. That is really, really important to understand. Let me say this again. You cannot create an LLC. You can have businesses associated with yours that are LLCs. Like I know a lot of contractors who create leasing companies. That's an LLC that leases their vehicles back to their S corp, and FedEx allows that. But the entity that holds the contract with FedEx, the TSPA, has to be an S corp or a C corp. Has to be registered in a state. Can be any state. But the state that you actually operate your runs on, you have to have what they call a foreign entity license, or sometimes it's called an alien corporation license, or a corporate alien license, which I always get a kick out of. It makes you think of like Star Wars and stuff like that. But that's just me being a sci-fi geek, I guess. But yeah, so you need to have that. So like for example, I'm not, and I do not recommend doing this. My businesses are organized. Yeah, and I am an Illinois-based corporation with my headquarters in Colorado, and I have foreign entity licenses to operate in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Mississippi. Okay, so which means that I file 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tax returns every year. Luckily, some of them, and then I actually, Kentucky's even worse because they have local taxes. So I have to file local income taxes in Kenton County, which is a pain in the butt. But I know of other contractors who are Delaware organized. So they're a Delaware corporation and then they operate wherever they operate. So that's fine. Anybody that's a partner to you has to be listed in your documentation. You have to declare their ownership stake. The AO is whoever has the majority ownership stake, unless you get a special dispensation from FedEx. But in general, your AO is going to be your majority ownership. As for, can you be a foreigner owning a FedEx corporation? I'm going to defer to Josh on how that one works.
Yeah, so we've done that a few times. If say you're not a US citizen, basically you'll have to work on kind of I think it's a
It's an alien registration.
yeah, anyway, we've done it a bunch of times. So if that is the case you're trying to do, we can help you work through that process. But because there is a specific process to be able to do that, and it's not super simple. And it's also going to have some impact based on what country you're coming from, what your timeline is. So we can help with that. And we're doing a couple right now, actually. The other thing I just add in on the C Corp side, usually the only people that I really see doing this are if they are doing a 401 or a Rob's 401k rollover, where essentially they're converting their retirement funds into the equity to purchase a business. That does require a C Corp. So that's one of the few cases I ever see people really doing it. But like Alex said, probably 95% of contractors are S Corp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, from an accounting perspective, and neither Josh or I are accountants, but trust us, the tax treatment of an S corp is really beneficial to a business owner, whereas a C corp, it makes it much more challenging. You really can't take advantage as an individual owner of the depreciation that you get and that you can roll up into your personal income tax return. The other thing that you have to remember is that every single person that is a percentage owner of your business has to go through First Advantage or FADV and has to get a FedEx ID. So they are all going to have to get a background check and be able to provide employment history and a criminal background check. So that is something that just to be mindful of, that the more complicated you make your ownership structure, the more people that are going to have to get verified by First Advantage.
Yeah, and beyond the corporate structure, which there's also a series of documents and things that you're going to need when you're kind of applying to be a contractor and taking over a business. And also, just to clarify from a question I saw, this applies to P&D and Linehaul for FedEx. It's the same process here. You will then go through an interview, and so that interview is basically they're testing one, do you know what you're getting into? Have you read this contract? Do you know kind of what you're walking into, what your safety and insurance and indemnity requirements are? And they're also, every terminal manager is going to handle a little bit differently in terms of how they interview. There's questions they have to ask, and then there's some additional questions on top of that where, depending on what they're looking for, they're trying to see how you handle pressure. They're trying to see, if there's a particular problem in the business that you're buying, if you're ready and equipped to solve that problem, because they don't want somebody to come in and have the same problem as the person who's leaving. So there's ways that can look, but if you're actually going through one of those interview processes, we can help you prep those specific questions and go through that process with you. But that's really the biggest FedEx kind of checkpoint in terms of checking your credentials and qualifiers is you'll need to prove that you have that S corp at the time of the interview. You'll need to prove a couple of other documents in terms of how you can file taxes and that you've been e-verified. And then you'll go and you'll do that interview. And after that interview, if they kind of move you forward in the process, there's a few other things you'll need to do before closing, but that's the biggest kind of qualifier checkpoint to make sure that you fit what FedEx needs from you.
Yeah, and then the other thing just remember is that within your first or second payroll, you have to update your state unemployment insurance identification number and provide that information to FedEx. So then that's something that actually trips up a lot of brand new contractors, not realizing that there is actually something. I mean, the FedEx is going to ask you for that number, and you always have to submit that you're applying for it. And then you have to respond back to them within I think it's a month or maybe it's 60 days. You have to respond back to them that this number has been identified and this is what my, I always think of it as SUI, but your state unemployment identification number is. So that's something just to remember. And then, we're actually about to approach our annual, I think they call it ACC. It's a compliance check. And what they're going to do is they're going to actually request a lot of documentation from you or the ability to access it by contacting your accountant. And they want to make sure that you're filing your taxes, that you are still a business in good standing with your organizing state, that you still have you still registered to operate in all these different states that you operate in. So they're going to ask you a number of different things. And at that point, they're also going to want to know, have you had a change in your ownership structure? And so you do need to come clean, because one of the things that they do is they do reach out to all your accountants, either a CPA or accounting firm, for all 1,700 contractors, and they ask, some basic questions to make sure that, yep, what you said is what they know and everything is true.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, all that's true. And I think, there may be other questions you have about this process. If you have it, just feel free to reach out to our team. Easiest way is always info@routeconsultant.com. And we can kind of direct where those questions are and help you if you have specific questions about something related to your situation or a step that you're in the process.
And just remember, look, guys, I mean, I was in your shoes 6 years ago. It was really scary when I quit my job and said, you know what? I'm done being a corporate monkey. I want to do something else. And I sat there looking at this gigantic chasm and saying, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. How am I going to get everything organized? And, trust me, that chasm ended up being like a small step. It
Yeah.
wasn't that hard. It really isn't. You have the guys at Route Consultants, you have your attorney, you have your CPA, and they can really get you through all the bells and whistles that you need to jump through and all the hoops to get you organized. And it can be done probably within 2 weeks. I mean, the biggest turnaround, honestly, is filing your documentation with the state and getting the state to respond back to you. And there's always a backlog.
Yeah. 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 It's why we always encourage you to file for that corporation in advance when you can. Just assuming that there's going to be a backlog. Just, that's the safest way to do it.
Oh, and check your name. Do a check to make sure that your company's name is not taken by somebody else.
Yeah.
Because that always causes a lot of problems. Like, you might have the best idea. I'm going to be Two Guys Trucking. Trust me, there is a Two Guys Trucking company in every single state. So you cannot be Two Guys Trucking. You can't even be like, I wanted to be AK Squared. You know what? AK Squared Logistics is already taken. AK Trucking, AK Squared, AK, all those were already taken.
That sometimes that creativity is the hardest part too, and you just kind of give up and it's whatever you can get approved.
Exactly.
Okay, so we only got time for like one more question. So let's do this one. We've got a guy who's trying to decide between Linehaul and P&D, and he's, we talked a lot about the great things around the flexibility, the potential of Linehaul. What would you say is the biggest risk in Linehaul? What keeps you up at night, or is the thing that if you were to talk about the cons of Linehaul, it would be?
My biggest fear, and the thing I hate, and I've taught my managers no longer to do this anymore, because they would call me up at like 3 a.m. and like ask me a question or say, hey, we got a truck broke down. I hate getting phone calls in the middle of the night, because the only thing that ever happened in my mind that ever happens to me at the middle of the night is an accident.
Yeah.
I think the biggest risk as being a line haul contractor is that you're going to have a fatality. Okay. And look, you're going to have the indemnification, you're going to have the insurance, but it's just wearing on your body and in your mind that, you ran a business where somebody died. And look, accidents happen. I think car accidents are the number one killer in the United States after like alcohol and cancer. So, there's somebody dying every day in a car accident. And, it breaks my heart to say that there was a fatality 2 days ago within the network on I-294 outside of Chicago. So it does happen, and that is the greatest risk. At the end of the day, my drivers are rolling down the highway, and if they fall asleep, that all of a sudden that truck that has a lot of safety and technology on it becomes an 80-ton missile going down the highway. So that's the biggest risk I have. And the biggest fear I have is that one of my drivers fell asleep. So, there's two things I always do. One is I don't ever dispatch if it's snowing. Okay. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it for your guy to try to make it that extra 5 miles and get that load in. Like FedEx is not going to like give you a hero's welcome if you drove through a blizzard and got the packages there on time. Instead, they're going to say, well, what were you thinking? These are packages. There's no reason. There's nothing that's desperate to get in. They're a bunch of shoes and Barbie dolls and Chewy's boxes and dog food and stuff like that. So if the weather's inclement, FedEx wants you to stay home. They don't want you to push through. So, and it's not worth it to your driver to push through in those situations. The other thing to think about is that I always tell my drivers, if you're tired, pull over. You know what? I'd rather take the service failure than you get into an accident. Me taking a 200-point hit is much, much more worth it to me than me turning around to my drivers and learning that they got into an accident. And then I'm looking at a minimum of $2,500. Every accident costs a minimum of $2,500. Regardless of the amount of damage that you did or did not do, if you're in an accident and you're at fault, FedEx is going to say, or sorry, if you're in an accident and it's deemed preventable, you're going to get assessed with $2,500. And understand that there's a difference between preventable and at fault. Okay. The accident could be preventable or non-preventable. Sorry. You could be not at fault, but the accident could still be preventable. Trust me, this happens all the time. So it's $2,500 at a minimum. At the maximum, if you've lost your indemnifications, you could be writing a $75,000 check to FedEx. So accidents are the greatest risk that we have in our business. It's the same in P&D, though ours happen to be a little bit more catastrophic, and that's what keeps me up at night, and that's the difference. But at the end of the day, I think the margins are better in line haul. The work-life balance is better in line haul, and the flexibility of your time is much, much better in line haul. So in my preference, and my suggestion is that everybody should be a line haul contractor and no one should be a P&D contractor. But, Rock Consultant doesn't like when I say that because, there's 6,000 P&D contractors out there. There's only 1,700. So let's put it this way. Even though I'm an Army guy, and the Marines there's Marines guys out there, line haul, we're the few, the proud, and, the smart ones. That's how I like to think about it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so I'm a big fan of being line haul versus P&D. Josh will say something different to you, but I'm line haul every day, all the time,
Yeah, I'll let Alex have this. I will say as a just a highlight of a couple of pros, if you're still on the fence for P&D, there is, one, we still see that there's a lot of kind of this organic growth. It doesn't it's very different in the way it works in line haul. P&D, because you own a territory, it's just if they build more houses, that's more stops. So there is kind of a growth train that you're just kind of hooking up to, and you're just keeping up with it. And that's a pro for a lot of people. It could be a con for you too, because it's a less controllable growth pipe that you're following. And so for some people, they like the kind of choice-based growth in line haul. P&D also, the driver's a lot easier to hire. So if your biggest worry is recruiting, then that could be an easy for you. And I'd also say what Alex pointed to is that there's a lot more contractors on P&D than there are line haul. So sometimes just getting into P&D is a lot easier than line haul. And I know tons of people who started in P&D, added line haul, or switched to line haul once they're already in the network, just because it's a lot easier to find those opportunities and acquire the right ones once you're already in the network. So there's more pros, more cons to both that we could talk about, but I'll kind of leave it at that. And if you have more direct questions on that, you can always reach out to our team.
I will say the one thing I've noticed, Josh, is that it's a lot easier to grow, and growth is a lot faster on the P&D side than it is on the line haul side. And just to think about it, like every single time I add one trailer to the network, that creates a whole new, that creates 1,300 more stops. Yeah. Okay, that's by and large the metric. So when I bring an additional trailer or FedEx adds an additional trailer to the network, okay, and a new run, that's creating almost a whole new CSA.
Yeah.
So just think about it that way. So you're creating a lot more. The growth is faster, and at times can be almost exponential in a high growth market. Like think Texas right now. Anything north of Houston and Dallas is exploding, and they're just it's like every single day I hear about a new CSA going in those locations. So that's something to think about. I would say growth is faster in the P&D side.
Yeah. Perfect. All right, Alex, thank you so much for being here, for answering everybody's questions. We're right up at time. So like we've said before, all of these are going to be on YouTube if you're looking for them, and we'll continue to be here every week. So Alex, thank you for being here, for answering everybody's questions.
It was my pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Perfect. And thanks to all of you for being here. Hopefully we will see you all next week, and see you for now.